This is a Dopamine Nation review. Hi, welcome or welcome back. My name is Justina. Today I am going to review the book called Dopamine Nation by an MD. I give the book a 10 out of 10 because I like reading books about the human mind. I learned many new things because I read this book. In this book, an MD, a diplomate of the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology, I have no idea what that is, talks about how our mind reacts to dopamine. She talks about experiments that were done on rats that show similarities to us humans, and it tells stories about her patients and herself. Basically, in this book she talks about dopamine. As always, I don't mean to offend anyone. From now on I'm going to put in my notes from the book and my thoughts while I was reading the book. Your phone can become a drug easily. I agree. I once was addicted to my phone. There are different ways to get addicted to something. In the first chapter she tells us about a guy who masturbated since he was 2 or 3 years old. The older he got, the more his masturbation methods became really unimaginably weirder. That's interesting. The author was addicted to graphic novels too. Like me, I thought I'm the only one. When it's easier to get a drug, we're more likely to try it. In trying, we're more likely to get addicted to it. One of her patients went through 14 different drugs in a little over a decade. That's more than one new drug each year. Another of her patients was shopping addicted and got thousands of dollars in debt. The porn industry is broken and disgusting. Agreed. Porn destroys people. As a former porn addict, I agree with this too. From now on I'll stop saying agreed, but know that I agree with almost everything she says in this book. The climate is getting worse too because people are shopping addicted. Chapter 2. Someone with an anxiety disorder got addicted to a medical help. The Stanford University likes happiness. One of the modern sayings is, if it feels good, do it. That's concerning. Kevin did what he wanted, and got depressed even though he has supportive parents and a good life. The percentage of drug use is rising like never before. She talks about a girl from South Korea who had anxiety and depression. Listening to music all the time can lead to depression and or anxiety. The addicted to medicine anxious guy got better and had a pregnant wife. The 6-year-old boy who abused his little brother thought that abuse is normal because of the internet. That's sad. Depression increased by 50% in less than 30 years. If you're unhappy, you are more likely to feel physical pain than someone who's happy. That's why the most unhappy people often have back pain. The reason we're all so miserable may be because we're working so hard to avoid being miserable. Chapter 3. If the brain feels pleasure, it needs to feel the same amount of pain because pain is the opposite of pleasure, and as we all know, nothing can exist without its opposite existing. Dopamine was discovered in 1957. The more we experience pleasure, the more our capacity to experience pleasure goes down and our vulnerability to pain goes up. Once you get addicted to something, nothing besides a worse addiction will feel good anymore. The longer you don't get dopamine, the more peaceful your life gets. If we are addicted to something and don't receive it, we feel bad because we're used to the dopamine. Gambling is like this. You win happy, you lose first, but then you win really happy. Pleasure rises the more you get dopamine. If you stop, the pleasure level will go down, but if you start again, the pleasure is as high as it was when you stopped. That means you're more likely to get addicted to something you were addicted to before than when you try something for the very first time. Of course, everyone is different, and for some it's worse, but for others it's better. My advice would be to stop that addiction forever, and when you relapse, accept it and move on. When you're really addicted to something, you don't notice how much it harms you because the pleasure is higher than the pain. The problem is when the pain becomes worse than the pleasure. You need to stop yourself from getting that dopamine. That can be a challenge. I heard this saying once and I'll never forget it. It's when the pain of not changing is greater than the pain of changing, we change. The last thing I learned in this chapter is that the more pleasure we get, the more pleasure we need, the less pain it takes to make us feel painful. Part 2, Chapter 4. Let me explain what the word dopamine means, or more like what the letters of the word dopamine mean. D stands for data, stands for objectives, stands for problems, stands for abstinence, stands for mindfulness, stands for insight, stands for next steps, stands for experiments. You can replace one addiction with a better one. Mindfulness is the ability to observe what our brain is doing while it's doing it, without judgment. The first few weeks without dopamine rewards could be difficult, but it gets easier. After 1 month without the addiction, you can try to return to using your drug of choice in a controlled way. Even though the author said herself it didn't work for her, it can still work for other people. She told stories about her patients doing that. Chapter 5. Create barriers between yourself and the addiction. There are many ways to create barriers. There's a physical barrier and a medical barrier. The physical barrier means that you make it impossible to take the drug physically. The medical barrier means that you take medical things so that you won't want to take the drug anymore. Another barrier is to use your drug of choice only at a specific plain time. The more you delay something, the less its value becomes. That's why if I think about doing an addiction later, I get the feeling that I will not enjoy the addiction by that time anymore because its value decreases. I don't know if that's good or bad because sometimes it makes me question why I want to do that addiction in the first place, but at other times I do the addiction especially because I know that I'll not enjoy it in the future anymore. Addictions can be so complicated. Sometimes even restrictions don't help because the addiction is the problem itself. That means you should restrict yourself from seeing or imagining the addiction. In this day and age, new addictions appear really fast, like on a daily basis if you pay attention to them. I know in the last chapter she said you should switch a harmful addiction with a less harmful one, but if you can, quit being addicted to something in the first place. The extreme porn addict got over his addiction. I believe that everyone can get over their addiction after reading this book. It's scary to think about, but drugs are being normalized. Treat an addiction like a child. Chapter 6. There are some drugs that are for mental health purposes, but they can get addicting too. Some medicines make your pain better only so that after you stop using it, the pain gets worse than it was before. If you have everything, you lose the desire to want. That can lead to you becoming numb to emotions. That was a really short chapter. Part 3. Chapter 7. You're probably like me and want to know how to get non-addictive dopamine. In this chapter you'll find out how. Cold showers are a way to get non-addictive dopamine. Cold water is a good way to inhibit great pain with little pain. Just as pain is the price we pay for pleasure, so too is pleasure the reward for pain. Exercise has a more profound and sustained positive effect on our mood, anxiety, cognition, energy, and sleep than any pill the author can prescribe. Use pain to treat your pain. When I was a child, I used to hit my stomach a little while I was running because when you're running your stomach can hurt. The pain would go away because I treated my pain with pain. That was a bad example. Please don't do that. More pain of something else weakens the pain of the withdrawal of the addiction. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Friedrich Nietzsche. I used his saying so often in my life. Every time I am scared to do something, I'm like, am I going to die if I do this? No, let's do it. It worked. I'm way stronger now than I used to be. It works with addictions too. Ask yourself theoretically, if I would stop doing this thing for an entire month, would I die physically? We're talking about physically, not mentally. Almost always you will not die. It's your mind that will feel the pain that feels like dying, if dying feels like anything, because you are so addicted to that thing that you can't live without it anymore. It's literally as if a part of you is dying when you try to quit an addiction, because the addiction is a part of you. If you develop a high tolerance to fear, you'll become confident. Being scared is normal. That's why doing scary things is important. Getting out of your comfort zone is important. Too much extreme sports is bad because if you get too used to pain, pleasure will not feel good anymore. It's like pain is good to treat addictions, but if you get addicted to pain it can get really dangerous. The pain becomes the addiction in the end. Feeling pain is painful. You can get addicted to work. I honestly wouldn't consider it bad, but sometimes it can get really bad where you would rather work than spend time with your family. I would say it's good to be a little addicted to work, but in the healthy, productive way. Chapter 8. Lying is easier than ever because humans are smart. As long as you're telling the truth, you don't have to worry for much longer. The more honest you are, the more honest you become, but the more you lie, the more you'll have to lie. That's why there's a lying addiction. Most of the time we realize we are addicted to something, but we don't think of it as an addiction. I know that might sound hard, but take 1 month off of doing your addiction. Think of it like this. If you don't stop doing something right now, there's a high chance that you're still going to do it in a month. A month turns into a year. That turns into 5 years, maybe even into 10 years. What are you waiting for? If you don't stop now, you probably never will. Stop now. Being vulnerable brings humans closer. Dopamine makes you careless about others. Sometimes a person is addicted to attention and uses their past to make people stay with them. That's so sad, but I did that too. Being responsible is important. That's why the M in dopamine stands for mindfulness. I don't remember what this is, but do AA's 12 steps. Sometimes we are part of the problem. The reason why someone gets better and all of a sudden the people around them get better too is because if someone around you gets better, you want to get better too. Quit expecting things. I'm not saying to quit your goals, but don't expect something to happen or someone to be your dream partner, because if you don't get disappointed, you're more likely to be happy. But if you have expectations, it's as if you're saying, I want to be disappointed. A scarcity mindset is made if people lie to you and don't keep their promises. It's always better to tell the truth than to lie. Honesty can prevent addictions. For example, you're addicted to something but you lie to others and you say you aren't addicted to it. If you would tell the truth, you would be more likely to change your behavior, because when others know about your addiction, you want to change. If you try to live up to expectations, you could become suicidal. Story time. Imagine pretending to be someone you aren't on social media. Then the next thing you know is that you're that person in real life. All of a sudden people think you are that person even though you never were like that. That's why you try to live up to their expectations. Now nobody knows the real you anymore. And you even forgot who you really are. How are you supposed to keep someone you don't now associate with anymore alive inside yourself? Most of the time, other people's expectations aren't worth it. Knowing that others have the same problem makes it easier to have that problem. Chapter 9. Take accountability for your addiction. It's important to admit your mistakes, accept yourself. Honesty is healing, a rush of emotional warmth that comes from feeling deeply connected to others. When we're accepted despite our flaws, is better than any addiction in this world. At last but not least, conclusion. If you're running away from something, stop, turn around, and face it. This is the end of my Dopamine Nation review. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like this video, comment with a cat emoji and subscribe to my channel. Bye. I love you.